Man is charged following a deadly stabbing from this weekend. Police say 36-year-old Pierre French stabbed Dreanna Booker multiple times with a knife. Officers responded to a call at around 1 in the morning Saturday in the 700 block of Bluff City Boulevard. That's where they found Booker dead from multiple stab wounds. French was arrested shortly after.
December 7th, 2024, 1:00 a.m., Elgin, Illinois. A 911 dispatcher receives a call that will change everything. The voice on the other end is calm, too calm, and the words that come next will haunt everyone who hears them. I snapped. That's all we're telling you for now. But those 2 words? They're about to unravel a story so twisted, so shocking, that you'll question everything you think you know about the people living right next door. The caller was someone this community trusted, someone parents relied on every single day, someone who had access to their most precious possessions, their children. But on this night, in a house on Bluff City Boulevard, that trust was about to be shattered forever. When police arrived at the scene, what they found defied explanation. A 33-year-old mother of 6, dead. But the killer, he was still there, waiting, like he wanted to be caught. 6 children were in that house, 6 innocent kids whose lives were about to change forever. The youngest, just 1 year old. The oldest, 14. Old enough to understand that their world had just collapsed. But here's what makes this case absolutely insane. This wasn't random. This wasn't a break-in gone wrong. This wasn't a stranger in the night. The person who destroyed this family was supposed to protect them. And the victim, she saw it coming. Months before her death, she tried to save herself. She went to the courts. She filed paperwork. She begged the system to help her. But then, and this is where it gets really messed up, she made one decision that sealed her fate. What was that decision? Why would someone who clearly feared for their life suddenly drop their guard? And how does a person the entire community trusted turn into something so dangerous? The answers are going to blow your mind, because this story has layers, twisted, dark layers that reveal how quickly someone's life can spiral out of control, how the system can fail when it matters most, and how evil can hide behind the most ordinary face. Welcome to our channel. If you're new, hit that subscribe button, like and share this video to those who needs to hear it. Drop a comment if you think you know what kind of person could do this, but trust me, you're not ready for what's coming. This is about betrayal at the deepest level. This is about warning signs that were ignored. This is about a woman who fought back and a system that let her down. This is the story of what happened on Bluff City Boulevard. And it's about to get a whole lot darker. Stay with us, because once you hear the full truth, you'll never look at your neighbors the same way again. Her name was Dreanna Booker, and before you hear about how she died, you need to understand how she lived. Because this woman was so much more than what happened to her on that December night. Dreanna wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. At 33, she was the kind of person who lit up every room she walked into. Her niece, Zane Scott, remembers exactly what made Dreanna special. She was a real inspirational person. But it wasn't just empty words.
She meant a lot. She was a real inspiration person.
Dreanna had this gift for making people see their own worth. She'd look at Zane and say, "You're so pretty," but it wasn't just a compliment. It was a mission. She taught her niece how to braid hair, how to take care of herself, how to find confidence in her own skin. She's the one that inspired me to do my braids and do my own hair, Zane recalls.
Meant the world, because she's the one that inspired me to start all my braids and do my own hair. And she always reminded me you're so pretty.
Think about that. In a world that constantly tears women down, Dreanna was building them up, one braid at a time. And the music? Oh, Dreanna had music in her soul. She was the lead singer of not one but 2 groups, the Temp Demps and Destiny Children. Whether it was church, community events, or just bringing joy to her family, Dreanna's voice was her superpower. But her greatest masterpiece? Her 6 children, ages 1 to 14. 6 little humans who looked at Dreanna and saw their entire world. Her nephew Tavion put it perfectly. Her kids meant the world to her. Nobody could take her kids away from her. Nobody could take her kids away. Remember those words, because they're about to become tragically important. Dreanna came from the kind of family that doesn't just talk about love, they live it. Her mother, Dreanna Booker Williams, raised her children with an unshakable faith foundation. "We got God in our life," Dreanna would say. "They're my strength, and I'm their strength." This wasn't just Sunday morning religion. This was the kind of faith that gets you through the darkest nights, the kind that holds families together when everything else falls apart. Her brother Thomas Mitchell shared that same spiritual backbone. These weren't people who gave up when life got hard. They were fighters. They were survivors. They believed in justice, but they also believed in putting their trust in something bigger than themselves. Dreanna had hobbies that revealed her creative soul. Poetry that captured her thoughts, beauty work that helped other women shine, moments of quiet where she'd watch birds and find peace in simple things. She was building a life filled with purpose, creativity, and love. But here's what makes this story so devastating. Dreanna wasn't naive. She wasn't some helpless victim who didn't see danger coming. She was smart. She was aware. She was fighting for her future. In May 2024, she made a decision that took incredible courage. She filed for divorce. After years of struggle, she was finally ready to break free and build the life she and her children deserved. The divorce was set to be finalized on January 1, 2025. A new year, a fresh start, freedom. She was just weeks away from getting everything she'd fought for. But someone else had very different plans. 2011. Dreanna said, "I do" to Pierre French, and for a moment, it probably felt like the beginning of a beautiful story. 2 people starting a life together, building a family, creating something lasting. But fairy tales don't end with 911 calls and blood-stained knives. Pierre was 36 years old when this nightmare reached its peak. His job? School bus driver. Think about that for a second. Every morning, parents in Elgin trusted this man with their most precious cargo. Kids climbed onto his bus, laughing, chatting, completely unaware of what was brewing beneath the surface. He lived on Clifford Court in Elgin, just another neighbor in just another suburban community. The kind of guy you'd wave to while getting your mail, the kind of person who blends into the background of everyday life. But behind closed doors, that's where the real Pierre French lived. By 2015, just 4 years into their marriage, something had gone so wrong that Dreanna and Pierre separated. 4 years. That's how long it took for whatever love existed between them to turn toxic enough that they couldn't even live under the same roof. But here's the twisted part. They stayed legally married for 9 more years. 9 years of this limbo, this legal connection that kept them tied together even when they were living apart. Why? The children. 6 beautiful kids who became the invisible chains keeping Dreanna tethered to a situation that was slowly destroying her. Court documents reveal the ugly truth about what their relationship had become. This wasn't just 2 people who grew apart. This wasn't irreconcilable differences or falling out of love. Pierre had developed an obsession, a dangerous, consuming jealousy that focused on one thing, Dreanna's male friend. He has been very angry about the petitioner and the petitioner's male friend being close. Those are Dreanna's own words from legal documents. But angry doesn't even begin to cover what was really happening. Pierre wasn't just upset. He was surveillance-level obsessed. He made unauthorized copies of keys to Dreanna's residence on Bluff City Boulevard. Let that sink in. He was literally breaking into her space, violating her privacy, making sure she could never truly escape his control. The police calls started piling up. 4 times in a single week, Dreanna had to call for help because Pierre showed up wanting to argue, displaying anger that was escalating beyond anything normal. He would just appear at her door, ready to fight, ready to make her life hell because she dared to have a friendship with another man. And the threats? Pierre made it crystal clear that he was willing to physically harm Dreanna's male friend. This wasn't just jealousy. This was a man who was planning violence. But the most chilling detail? Pierre's behavior showed all the classic signs of an abuser who was losing control. The unauthorized keys meant he could access her space anytime he wanted. The repeated confrontations meant he was testing boundaries, seeing how far he could push before she broke. The 4 police calls in 1 week? That's not coincidence. That's escalation. That's a man who was building up to something bigger, something more dangerous. Dreanna was living in a prison of fear, and Pierre held all the keys. Literally. By May 2024, Dreanna had finally reached her breaking point. 13 years of marriage, 9 years of separation, and countless incidents of harassment and threats. She filed for divorce. The date was set, January 1, 2025, New Year's Day, a symbolic fresh start, a legal end to the nightmare that had consumed over a decade of her life. But Pierre French wasn't the kind of man who accepted endings. He wasn't the type to let go gracefully or respect boundaries. As that divorce date approached, as Dreanna got closer and closer to true freedom, Pierre's behavior was about to take a turn that would shock everyone who thought they knew him. Because when a controlling man realizes he's about to lose his power forever, that's when he becomes most dangerous. And Dreanna was about to learn that lesson in the most tragic way possible. July 2024. Dreanna Booker made a decision that should have saved her life. She walked into a courthouse and filed an emergency order of protection against Pierre French. This wasn't a woman being dramatic or overreacting. This was someone who had finally reached the point where she knew, absolutely knew, that her life was in danger. The paperwork she filled out reads like a horror story. Pierre's jealousy had mutated into something far more sinister. He wasn't just angry about Dreanna's male friend anymore. He was making specific, targeted threats. He has threatened to physically harm her male friend. Let that marinate for a second. Pierre wasn't just upset that Dreanna had moved on emotionally. He was actively planning violence against another human being simply for existing in her life. But the threats weren't the scariest part. It was the stalking. Pierre had crossed every possible boundary. He'd made unauthorized copies of keys to her residence on Bluff City Boulevard. Think about what that means. Dreanna would go to sleep at night knowing that at any moment Pierre could walk through her front door. She had no privacy, no safety, no peace. The police calls were becoming a weekly routine. 4 times in 7 days, Dreanna had to dial 911 because Pierre showed up at her home, ready to argue, displaying the kind of anger that made her fear for her safety. This wasn't random visits. This was systematic harassment. Pierre would just appear, wanting to fight, wanting to control, wanting to make sure Dreanna understood that even though they were separated, he still owned her. The emergency protection order was granted. For a brief moment, Dreanna had legal protection, a piece of paper that said Pierre French could not come near her, could not contact her, could not continue his campaign of terror. But then something happened that would seal her fate. August 2024, just 1 month after getting the protection that could have saved her life, Dreanna made a decision that still haunts everyone who knew her case. She withdrew her request for a longer-lasting plenary order of protection. Why would a woman who was clearly terrified, who had documented threats and stalking behavior, who had called police 4 times in 1 week, why would she voluntarily give up her legal protection? The answer reveals just how manipulative Pierre had become. He convinced her, somehow, some way, that things had changed, that they could work together, that they could be civil for the sake of their 6 children. They signed a judge-approved agreement in their divorce case, a piece of paper that said they would treat each other with respect and not enter each other's residences without permission. Judge Sandra Parga oversaw this agreement. On paper, it looked reasonable. Two adults, working through their divorce, agreeing to basic human decency. But Dreanna had just traded a legal protection order for a gentleman's agreement with a man who had been stalking her. She believed him. Maybe she wanted to believe that the father of her 6 children could change. Maybe she thought that involving the courts in their divorce would be enough to keep him in line. Maybe she was just exhausted from fighting and wanted to try a different approach. Whatever her reasoning, that decision in August 2024 removed the one legal barrier standing between Pierre and his ability to access her life. The divorce was still moving forward. January 1, 2025 was still circled on the calendar as her freedom date, but now Pierre knew that Dreanna had backed down once. He knew she was willing to trust him again. And for a man who had already shown he couldn't handle the idea of losing control, that knowledge was dangerous. The months between August and December must have been torture for Dreanna, every day wondering if Pierre would respect their agreement, every night going to sleep knowing he still had access to her world, every moment hoping that maybe, just maybe, he had actually changed. But Pierre French hadn't changed. If anything, he was getting worse. As that January 1st divorce date got closer and closer, as Dreanna's freedom became more real, Pierre was planning something that would ensure she never escaped him. Have you ever trusted someone who betrayed you? Tell us in the comments, because Dreanna's trust cost her everything. Because what happened next proves that some people see kindness as weakness, and they'll use that weakness to destroy you. December 7, 2024. 1:00 a.m. The house on Bluff City Boulevard should have been quiet. 6 children sleeping peacefully, their mother finally getting some rest after another long day of juggling everything life threw at her. Instead, it became a crime scene that would leave an entire community asking one question: how did we miss the signs? When Elgin police received that call in the early morning hours, they had no idea they were about to walk into a nightmare that would haunt them for years. The voice on the other end of the line was Pierre French, and his words were chilling in their simplicity. I snapped. I stabbed her. No emotion, no panic, no remorse. Just a matter-of-fact confession from a man who had just destroyed everything. Officers raced to the scene, but they were already too late. Dreanna Booker lay dead from multiple stab wounds. The brutality of the attack told a story of pure rage. This wasn't a single moment of anger. This was sustained, deliberate violence. Pierre was found at the scene, and he didn't run. He didn't hide. He didn't try to escape or make excuses. He was just there, waiting. The weapon? A butcher knife with red substance coating the blade, the same kind of knife you'd find in any kitchen, transformed into an instrument of murder. But here's where this case takes a turn that nobody saw coming. Pierre's night of violence didn't start with Dreanna, and it didn't end with her either. Before police arrived at Bluff City Boulevard, Pierre had been on what can only be described as a rampage. He had rammed another man's car repeatedly, over and over again, using his vehicle as a weapon. When officers searched his car, they found another knife on the passenger seat, another weapon, ready for more violence. This wasn't a crime of passion. This wasn't a man who snapped in a single moment of rage. This was calculated. This was planned. This was a man who had armed himself and set out to cause as much damage as possible. Kane County prosecutors would later reveal the full scope of Pierre's confession. He told emergency dispatchers exactly what he had done, with the kind of detail that made seasoned law enforcement officers sick to their stomachs. Judge Sandra Parga, who had overseen the couple's divorce proceedings, now found herself reviewing a detention order for a man who had just committed the ultimate act of domestic violence. The evidence was overwhelming. Pierre's confession, the bloody knife, the additional violence throughout the night. the pattern of escalating behavior that had been building for months. But the most heartbreaking detail of all, the 6 children. They were in that house, ages 1 to 14, sleeping in their beds while their father murdered their mother just rooms away. What did they hear? What did they see? How do you explain to a 1-year-old that mommy isn't coming back? How do you tell a 14-year-old that daddy is the reason? Pierre French had just orphaned his own children. In one night of violence, he had taken away their mother and guaranteed they would lose their father too. The timeline makes it even more devastating. Dreanna's divorce was set to be finalized on January 1, 2025. She was less than a month away from legal freedom, less than a month away from starting the new life she had fought so hard to build. Pierre couldn't handle that. He couldn't accept that Dreanna was going to escape his control, so he made sure that if he couldn't have her, nobody could. When officers took Pierre into custody, he didn't resist. There was no dramatic chase, no final standoff. He had accomplished what he set out to do, and now he was ready to face the consequences. But those consequences would never bring Dreanna back. They would never undo the trauma inflicted on 6 innocent children. They would never repair the damage done to a family that had already been through so much. The house on Bluff City Boulevard, which should have been a sanctuary for a mother and her children, had become the site of the ultimate betrayal. The man who was supposed to protect them had become their greatest threat. And the most twisted part of all, this could have been prevented. The warning signs were there, the protection order had been filed, the system had a chance to intervene. But sometimes, evil hides behind the most ordinary faces. Sometimes, the person everyone trusts is the one you should fear most. Pierre French had just proven that in the most horrific way possible. Kane County State's Attorney Jamie L. Mosser wasn't playing games. When the evidence landed on her desk, Pierre's confession, the bloody butcher knife, the multiple stab wounds, the additional violence throughout that December night, she knew exactly what kind of charges this case demanded. 2 counts of first-degree murder. Not manslaughter, not second-degree murder, first-degree. The kind of charges reserved for the most calculated, most heinous crimes. The kind that carry life sentences. Prosecutors made it crystal clear in their filings. Pierre French intended to kill her and knew his actions created a strong probability of her death. This wasn't a moment of passion that got out of hand. This was premeditated murder. The evidence was so overwhelming that Pierre's next court appearance was scheduled for December 18th in Kane County. No bail, no release, no second chances. Kane County Jail became Pierre's new permanent address, and honestly, that's exactly where he belongs. But while the legal system was grinding into motion, the real victims of Pierre's violence were trying to figure out how to survive. 6 children, ages 1 to 14. In one night, they lost both parents. Their mother to violence, their father to his own evil choices. The youngest doesn't even understand what happened. The oldest is trying to process a trauma that will follow them for the rest of their lives. And the 4 in between, they're somewhere in that horrible space of knowing enough to be devastated, but not enough to make sense of it all. But here's what makes this family extraordinary. They didn't fall apart. Dreanna Booker Williams, Dreanna's mother, stepped up in a way that shows where Dreanna got her strength.
God in our life, and they my strength and I'm their strength.
We got God in our life, she said. They're my strength, and I'm their strength. This woman just lost her daughter in the most horrific way possible, and she's already focused on being the rock these 6 children need. That's not just faith. That's pure love in action.
I want justice for my baby, you know. Everything gonna be, we putting it in God's hands as well. And Lord, have mercy.
Thomas Mitchell, Dreanna's brother, captured what the entire family was feeling. We want justice for my baby. Everything else we're putting in God's hands. Lord, have mercy. Justice and faith legal consequences and spiritual healing. This family understands that both are necessary to move forward. The community of Elgin was reeling. Parents who had trusted Pierre French with their children every morning were now questioning everything. How do you explain to your kids that their school bus driver, someone they saw as safe, was capable of such violence? School districts had to have difficult conversations. Families had to process the reality that evil can hide behind the most ordinary faces. But the most shocking part? Pierre's December 18th court date was just the beginning. This case was going to drag on for months, maybe years. Every hearing, every legal proceeding, every news report would be another reminder for those 6 children of what their father had done. The legal system would eventually deliver justice. Pierre French would face the consequences of his choices. But justice can't bring back a mother. Justice can't undo trauma. Justice can't give 6 children their lives back. Some damage is permanent. Some wounds never fully heal. And that's the real tragedy of December 7th, 2024. Dreanna Booker was never just a victim. She was the lead singer who brought music to her community through the Temp Temps and Destiny Children. She was the mentor who taught her niece Zane Scott to braid hair and believe in her own beauty. She was the mother who made 6 children feel like they were her entire world. She was an artist, an inspiration, a woman who lifted others up even while fighting her own battles. Today, those 6 children, ages 1 to 14, are being raised by a family that refuses to let Pierre's violence define their story. Dreanna Booker Williams and the extended family are proving that love is stronger than hate, that faith can overcome even the darkest tragedy. But the questions remain. Could this have been prevented? What if Dreanna hadn't dropped that protection order? What if the system had better safeguards? What if someone had recognized the escalation before it was too late? The real crime isn't just what Pierre French did on December 7th, 2024. It's a system that failed when it mattered most. It's warning signs that were ignored. It's a woman who tried to save herself and wasn't protected when she needed it most. Pierre French thought he could control Dreanna forever. But her story will outlive his violence. Her legacy lives in those 6 children, in the family members she inspired, in every person who hears her story and decides to do better.